Delta-8 becomes illegal on Friday, July 31st. And I'm Nathan Bernier with KUT News, and I'm joined here by Amanda Taylor. And she is a lawyer with Butler Snow. She's a board certified, she's an appellate law specialist, right? And she was actually lead counsel in the Sky Marketing case, in the Delta-8 case that wound its way through Texas courts. In 2021, there was a temporary injunction issued that allowed for the sale of hemp-derived Delta-8. And that temporary injunction allowed for gas stations and smoke shops to sell gummies and vapes for a while. But that was overturned by the Texas Supreme Court. And now the Department of State Health Services has announced that it is adding Delta-8 back to its list of Schedule I substances. So what does this mean for you? What does this mean for the hemp industry in Texas? So happy to have Amanda here to talk about it. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So, why is Delta-8 being banned on Friday?
Simply, the agency has decided to reinstate clarifications to the schedule that they first attempted to modify in 2021, and now they are modifying again. But it's really important to pay attention to those words and understand what's being allowed to happen. Because first they say it's a clarification, okay? Mm-hmm. It's not a clarification. What is being controlled now is very different than what was controlled under the prior schedule. We can talk more about that, but it is more of a substantive change than a clarification. And secondly, they're calling it a reinstatement. But they are not actually reinstating something. They are modifying a schedule without going through any of the procedural requirements for notice, comment, and rulemaking. They're doing this because the Supreme Court said they were allowed to modify the schedule in 2021. But that doesn't change the fact that we now have a 2025 schedule that is being modified, substantively modified, without any procedural notice, comment, and public hearing that the statute provides for. So the reason it's changing is because the agency has decided to, quote, reinstate a clarification. But people need to be paying attention to what's happening.
Okay. Now, I just want to take a step back, and because a lot of people don't. First of all, I want to get to that because you had a filing today, right, on this topic. Am I understanding that right? Or
no, we did not.
Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood that.
Okay.
But I want to take a step back because a lot of people don't get why Delta-8, which is generally understood to be less potent than Delta-9 THC, the main psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. Why is that being made illegal and a felony? It's like I forget what they call it, penalty group 2 or something, right? And added to Schedule I, which is a list of substances that also includes like MDMA and DMT and peyote, and heroin is on there too. A whole bunch of different drugs. Why is Delta-8 illegal, but Delta-9, you can go to the store right now and buy some gummies?
Right. It's an illogical result. I agree with that, and I understand the confusion. Let's talk about what the Supreme Court held and how we got to this result.
Sure, I'm just going to move this here. Pardon me.
Sure. So the Supreme Court treated differently Delta-9 THC and said under the 2019 Farm Bill, Delta-9 up to 0.3% is expressly protected. That is not a controlled substance.
Because that's hemp, right?
No, that is the way that we define hemp, distinguished from marijuana, is the Delta-9 potency. So that is accurate. But Delta-9 can be extracted from the cannabis plant and put into a final product. That is legal up to 3% under the Farm Bill.
Right.
We all agree on that. That's the easy part.
Up to 0.3%.
Up to 3%.
Or 0.3, right?
0.3%
right.
on a dry weight basis.
Sure.
Then we have all other THCs, Delta-9, Delta-8, Delta-10.
THCP, super potent.
I would say THCP is different than THC.
Yeah.
But so you look at all other THCs, which include Delta-8. Under the 2019 Farm Bill, the legislature said THC and THC in hemp is decontrolled, okay? So 2019, those are not controlled. What the Texas Supreme Court held this year is that what that really means is only trace amounts of the naturally occurring THCs. That's not what the statute says. Those words are nowhere in the statute. They do not say, the statute does not say trace amount. It doesn't say naturally occurring. But the Texas Supreme Court interpreted it that way and then said the commissioner is authorized to ban or control all other THC besides Delta-8 at 0.3%, other than the naturally occurring trace amounts, because the commissioner had to concede you can't have a hemp product without at least the trace amounts. It's impossible to take that out.
Right.
So that's how we have wound up in this odd circumstance where Delta-8 THC, which is not psychoactive on its own, not in its naturally occurring state, is far more mild. It is somehow considered a hallucinogenic Schedule I substance, like you said, like meth or ecstasy.
Right.
It's a very illogical result.
And so is it because my understanding just from, again, I'm not a lawyer, but reading the Supreme Court decision seemed like they were drawing a distinction between Delta-8 because what's sold in stores is essentially converted from CBD, right? As opposed to Delta-9, which is just extracted from the plant?
If that is what the Supreme Court thought, I'm not sure they understand the science.
Okay.
I mean, Delta-8 is also naturally derived from the hemp plant. It's
Right.
extracted. Yes, it can be concentrated in a product, but these are always, in these final products, natural substances. They are not synthetic. They are not analogs. They are not chemically laced with anything. In order to comply with the extensive safety precautions that already exist under the statute, these have to be natural products. Concentrated, yes, a concentrated potency of Delta-8, but natural. And that does seem to have been lost in the conversation.
Okay. So if it's an issue of concentration, then I realize that I don't want to get too into the weeds here, pun intended. But is it possible that Delta-9 concentrates could this affect that if that's what we're talking about? Because I thought the distinction was that Delta-8, at times was a lot of it in the stores was started as CBD, and even though it is a naturally occurring in the cannabis plant, it's not a synthetic cannabinoid, but it can be, created. And I know I want to be careful with using synthesized versus manufactured versus created, but it can be created with CBD but perhaps Delta-9 concentrate wouldn't face those types of restrictions down the road because it is simply extracted as opposed to some kind of conversion process that happens. Am I understanding that right?
Well, I say the legislature has already defined the concentration of Delta-9.
Right.
That is the 0.3% dry weight limit.
Right.
So they put that concentration limit on Delta-9 because the legislature did not put any limitations on other THCs.
Right.
That's where the Supreme Court injected an interpretation to say it's limited to naturally occurring trace amounts. Again, the legislature never said that. The Supreme Court has supplied that interpretation.
Right. The law itself, as I recall, and I don't have it in front of me, it was like, the hemp is cannabis, basically, with less than 0.3% Delta-9 THC, and then there's language that's something to the effect and all of its isomers and oils and resins and whatever. And so the presumption was on part of the industry that, okay, well then that includes everything that's naturally occurring in cannabis, and so that's Delta-8 is legal.
That's correct.
And then the Department of State Health Services said, it's not, and we're adding it to Schedule I, and that's where the lawsuit kicked in. And I just wonder, now we're facing this. I mean, how do you feel about this whole thing? Because it's been such a journey over the last, 5 years?
It has, and it's incredibly disappointing. I mean, it's always difficult for a lawyer to have an adverse opinion. This case is extremely difficult because of the real life consequences. There are small businesses across the state. There is a huge population of veterans and other consumers that use these products, consumable hemp products, as a safe and effective alternative to chemical, drugs, and alcohol. Mm-hmm. And the billions of dollars, and I say that with a B, as in boy, billions of dollars that the consumable hemp industry has contributed to the Texas economy on an annual basis in the form of sales tax revenues and job growth, that comes from responsible businesses, the ones who are getting licensed and registered and producing safe products that comply with all these rules that our legislature gave us. They set the rules, these businesses complied with them, and now because some members of our government want to make it their personal mission to ban this thriving industry, small businesses are literally being closed and put out of business on a daily basis because of these changes. That makes this particular result very difficult for me as a proud Texan to stomach. And I do want to clarify, there have been some stories about this, perhaps a gas station business or another business that might be considered a bad actor. Mm-hmm. Those aren't the businesses we're talking about. We're talking about the ones who are playing by the rules, who have paid the fees, who have done everything required to produce these products as the legislature said they could. That's who's being put out of business.
Well, and I mean, so we talk about Delta-8, right? But you mentioned Delta-10. I mentioned THCP. Is it possible to know, because the cannabinoids are not named in the DSHS rule. Is it possible to know which cannabinoids are covered by the rule that's taking effect July 31st?
This is another problem. It is very confusing, and it's going to have to be sorted out through the legal system, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. I've studied the language. I think there are 3 cannabinoids that we know are legal.
Okay.
So we can start with that.
Let's start with that.
We know, well, first of all, cannabinoid means a lot of things. It's THC, it's CBD, it's CBG, it is other compounds from the plant. So cannabinoid is the broad term that includes all those things.
There's like over 100 of them, I think.
Exactly. And so they are not all defined in the statute. But here's what we know. Delta-9 THC up to 3%. That's protected, not a controlled substance. Other THCs in naturally occurring trace amounts, if derived from the hemp plant, are protected. Those are not controlled. And then CBD and all the other cannabinoids that are not expressly listed on Schedule 1 are protected.
Okay.
So you've really just got certain categories. You can't go beyond trace amounts of other THCs, and you can't go beyond 0.3 Delta-9 THC.
Okay. So that's what's legal.
Right.
What's a felony?
Well, the agency, by taking this position on naturally occurring trace amounts, has created its own regulatory nightmare that it will have to unravel for itself. We don't have all the answers today, and we don't know how they are planning to enforce this on the civil side from DSHS or the criminal side from law enforcement agencies. Also within the penalty group statute in the Controlled Substances Act, there are a number of exceptions and legal defenses to these potential criminal claims. And so this is going to result in a lot of lawsuits, unfortunately, while people figure out what it means. Okay,
right. Yeah, I mean, you raised some great points. There's a lot of uncertainty. So I asked the Austin Police Department. They said they will treat it as a felony, a state jail felony, but it's unclear what kind of enforcement there's going to be. I was texting with a friend last night, and just mentioning, because he's read the story, and I was like, I can't imagine in the Travis County prosecutor sending, a mom to jail for a gummy she kept in her nightstand to help her sleep. But that's what we're talking about with Delta-8 a lot of the time.
Right.
So I asked DPS, is your enforcement going to change? And they just said, for questions about this change, we refer you to the Texas Department of State Health Services. That was the entirety of their statement. And then I asked Department of State Health Services, and they sent me some information. But what really stood out to me was this language, which was that, and this is a quote from their spokesperson, Laura Anton. It said, consumable hemp products labeled to contain Delta-8 THC or shown to contain more than trace amounts of tetrahydrocannabinols, including Delta-8, may be detained and referred to law enforcement. So in other words, if inspectors come across something in a store, they might refer it to law enforcement. But for your average person out there who maybe they have still some Delta-8 gummies in their cabinet or whatever, the police aren't saying... What is the realistic risk to your average person, do you think, who might possess these, and they're worried, I don't want to be a felon, I don't want to go to jail for 6 months to 2 years, because that's the penalty range, and a fine of up to $10,000 for a state jail felony. I mean, what do they do?
Right. Well, I'm going to give you a lawyer answer.
Okay, I knew you were going to do that.
Which is, I am not a criminal lawyer.
Yeah, okay.
And so I deal with this agency, the Department of State Health Services. It does not have criminal enforcement authority.
Sure.
It enforces the civil regulations against the licensed and registered businesses. Right. So for individual consumers concerned about criminal penalties, they really need to consult a criminal lawyer, and they also need to contact their elected officials at the municipal level and the state level and let them know how they feel and what their concerns are about this. And to your point, why would it make sense to prosecute a mom who has a gummy for sleep? That is not a good use of municipal or state resources, in my opinion. So as I started with, people have to be paying attention and they have to get themselves informed on this topic. But they do face a risk. I mean, I cannot deny that when something is on a Schedule I controlled substance list and there is a penalty group that says it can be a felony, there might be defenses, there might be exceptions available, but unless they talk to a criminal lawyer to understand their personal situation, they face some risk.
Right. So what's next in this saga? Well, I mean, the temporary injunction was overturned, but the Texas Supreme Court said this case can't continue. I spoke to Lucas Gilkey, who's, Sky Marketing, a.k.a. Hometown Hero, a co-founder and CEO. And in that interview, he essentially said, I don't know if I'm going to continue. I'm talking to my lawyers about this. It's super expensive. And I heard maybe some other businesses are going to sue. So I don't know, will the case continue? Are the odds against the plaintiff, given that the Texas Supreme Court did overturn the temporary injunction? I'm just kind of wondering where we go from here.
Right. So the Sky Marketing case has now concluded. That is the case that was focused on Delta-8. The other case that is currently in the 15th Court of Appeals on behalf of the Texas Hemp Business Council and other plaintiffs remains very much alive. The 15th Court of Appeals will consider that on the merits. This is the case about the total THC ban that occurred this year in 2026.
Like smokable cannabis products, and also all of those regulations, the $5,000 a year fee for retailers and $10,000 for manufacturers and that kind of thing.
That's right. And so that case is still working its way through the courts. It is not directly impacted by the holdings in Sky Marketing because there are a number of differences in the claims presented. So the Texas Hemp Business Council is continuing to fight for the industry on these issues. It needs support, no doubt. It needs the support of the industry to continue that legal fight. But it is the one taking the primary position, leading the charge, and the merits of that case, in my opinion, are very strong. I am also lead counsel in that case.
You would say that then.
I would. However, there has been a decent amount of coverage on that case. But it will be interesting to see how the court applies the Administrative Procedure Act, the APA rulemaking requirements, which are different than what the scheduling requirements were. So those are two different statutes. Right. They're presenting two different legal questions on a related topic.
And that, not to get in too much in the details, but that has to do with the process by which the rules were adopted, right?
Yes.
Versus the rules themselves. And there you're kind of attacking both of them.
Yes. Okay.
So but the Delta-8 lawsuit, for lack of a better term, Sky Marketing lawsuit, is it gonna, I guess you don't know yet because, Lucas has not, maybe he has decided, but he certainly didn't say.
Right. Well, the thing that remains available on Delta-8 is yesterday, Dishes gave an announcement that they will be conducting further rulemaking related to Delta-8 under this new schedule. And so if you are interested in this issue, this is the time to make sure you've signed up for notifications, and you will have an opportunity for public comment and a hearing on the new rules. The schedule is being enacted. But the rules still haven't even been released. And so there's more to come on Delta-8.
And right now I know that there is, the temporary injunction prohibits the sale of smokable hemp products like flour and concentrate. But a lot of, possession of that, unlike with Delta-8, possession of those products, as I understand it, is still legal because that's not been added to like the Schedule I controlled substances list, right? And so a lot of out-of-state businesses will still ship it into Texas, even though according to DSHS, they shouldn't be doing that. Is it going to be the same thing with Delta-8? Because now it's on the Schedule I substances list. It's maybe more of a serious serious business to ship that from out of state into Texas if you're just like, in another hemp legal state?
I really can't comment on out of state shipping procedures, but you are right that in terms of individual consumer possession, nothing about the total THC rule has made its way onto the schedule. Right. So it's not on the schedule. It's not in a penalty group for criminal purposes. The enforcement remains at the civil level for businesses.
Okay, right. I got you. Is it possible that could happen? That the DSHS might say, maybe I'm not thinking through this clearly, but you just raised that, and I thought, could they put Delta-8 THC over 0.3% on the Schedule 1 list of controlled substances, or is that far-fetched?
If they choose to amend the schedule, which will also be potentially impacted by what we don't know yet may happen at the federal level, they will have to go through the notice, comment, rule, public hearing requirements. So it's to be determined.
Right.
For right now, it's also remains completely viable that the Court of Appeals could rule in our favor on the THBC lawsuit that says the way they passed that rule to begin with was improper.
Okay.
And so the rule itself is voidable or void, and we go back for a full trial on the merits.
And would that happen? Would that affect Delta-8, or that would just be on the Delta-9 stuff?
It's just on the total Delta-9.
Total Delta-9 calculation. Okay. And now you mentioned the federal level. I don't know if you've been following that closely. I should be following it more closely myself. But
there's a lot in Texas to keep us busy.
Sure. Does any of that play into what you're doing now?
Other than watching it and tracking, it's just impossible to know if that will actually happen. There has been a significant amount of pushback at the federal level from people across many, many states, understanding the economic benefit of the consumable hemp industry and why it is beneficial for anyone's, representative's particular state and jurisdiction. We've heard a lot coming out of federal sources that it very well might never take effect. And so at this point, we just have to wait and see.
Okay. Is there anything else I should ask you that I didn't touch on, or we cover the main points here, you think?
I think we've covered it.
All right. Well, Amanda Taylor with Butler Snow, thanks so much for coming on down to KUT and talking to me on my iPhone. We'll get this video situation sorted out, but I just really wanted to have her on and talk to her, and she was coming in already to be on the Austin Signal. So check out that local news show at KUT.org or at 90.5 FM. It airs weekdays at 1. And thanks so much, Amanda.
Thank you. It's an honor.